I want to join you and the others for welcoming our distinguished guest here today, and I look forward to the discussions that will ensue. There are just a couple of issues that I want to touch upon very briefly, and I think you're familiar with them. One of them is my outrage that the crooks and swindlers who destroyed the savings and loan industry are still getting away with murder and are still not paying back their fair share of the cost of the debacle. And I want to raise that issue later as well. And the second concern that I want to touch upon briefly is that despite all of the soaring rhetoric we hear lately about the terrible $4 trillion debt and our deficit, $400 billion, unless I am missing something, the President and the leadership of the Democratic and Republican parties, and perhaps these gentlemen here will help us, are still not explaining to us why we dump hundreds of billions of dollars into the deficit to deal with the S&L bailout. Now, maybe I'm missing something, but if we have a major deficit crisis, why are you not helping us, and not just you? Why is not the President, the leadership of the two major parties coming forward with ideas that say maybe there's another way to deal with the deficit other than dumping it, to deal with the S&L bailout other than dumping it into the deficit? Mr. Chairman, specifically, I am concerned, and perhaps we can discuss this later today, that bank officers and directors of S&L institutions are not even paying the minimal level of restitution that the courts have ordered. According to the GAO report as of March 1992, and perhaps we'll discuss this at greater length later, in the cases of the top 100 failed thrifts, from which allegedly $597 million was stolen, $79 million in restitution was ordered by the courts. $79 million in restitution. How much did those individuals actually pay out of the $79 million? Now, you know, when a kid robs an A&P, they go after that kid. Hey, give us back that $500. But out of the $79 million, only, as best I can hear, only $349,000, 0.4%, was paid back. 0.4%. Further, officers of those S&Ls and others involved who were fined $4.5 million by the courts actually paid a total of only $15,000 in fine, just 1/3 of 1%. Now, if we're talking about justice and not a double level of justice, if you're an S&L crook, you don't have to pay back what the courts ask, but if you're somebody else, you do. I think this is an issue, Mr. Chairman, that we might want to see addressed. And that's the second issue, as I touched upon earlier, deals with my feeling that the S&L bailout cannot simply be dumped into the deficit. As you and I both know, there's been a lot of soaring rhetoric, especially around the constitutional amendment to balance the budget. Everyone is raising the concerns, and then we go ahead and proceed to put hundreds of billions of dollars into the deficit. I would urge, Mr. Chairman, and hope that some of our distinguished guests will talk with us today about ways that we can deal with the S&L bailout other than dumping it into the deficit. I would once again bring up an idea that I think is worthy of a whole lot of discussion. Congressman Joe Kennedy has raised this issue. Senator John Kerry has raised this issue. Others have put forward the program called a clearance transaction fee that could, in fact, in my view, provide the necessary funds. A clearance transaction fee of only 2 basic points. That's 2/100ths of 1% levied on every monetary...
Mr. Chairman, I thought we had a 2-minute limit.
Pardon me?
I think we have a 2-minute time limit.
Well, all right, I'll be finished in a very brief time. 2/100ths of 1% levied on every monetary transaction throughout the Fedwire system, and the CHIP system has been estimated to raise $80 billion. In other words, Congressman Kennedy, Senator Kerry, others have brought forth an idea. I would like some thoughts as to whether that idea makes more sense than simply dumping the money into the deficit, and I thank the chairman very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Yes. I wonder if I might ask unanimous consent to include at this point in the record, I think this is the place for it, a letter from the Attorney General of the United States concerning the fact that Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Sanders said they might not be doing enough to pursue the crooks in this area. And it indicates that there are 2,942 defendants who have been charged. 2,300 defendants have been convicted, which is a 96% conviction rate. I think they're probably pursuing this as quickly and as ambitiously as they can, but I think it's timely to put this point in the record. And I might also say, yes?
I think the gentleman might recall that this committee tried very hard to provide additional money so that the Justice Department could go out and hire the necessary accountants, hire the necessary personnel with the job descriptions and job background that could have enabled them to go after these prosecutions much more effectively. The administration worked hard to defeat that amendment.
Well, we did it anyhow.
The fact is that this Justice Department has not been working hard
in
pursuing
1990, we did
SNL
provide
programs.
additional money, and they have hired
Is there any objection to the unanimous consent request the Attorney General be placed on the record? Hearing none, so ordered. That's the second set of bells, meaning we have about 10 minutes to go record our votes. I think the better part of prudence is that before we recognize the Secretary and then have him interrupted, that we all proceed with dispatch and go record our votes and come back as soon as possible. And we ask the consideration of the witnesses.
That's the wheel of government.